From DC to LA,
This is Channel AP News.
hello, this is Channel 8 News. I'm Michael.
And I'm Eitan. Welcome to our show.
In current events, Senator Ron Paul has announced his candidacy for president in 2016.
He has also announced that he has hired Jon Stewart to be his campaign manager in hopes to gain more support.
Geez, how many times can a guy run for president?
I think this is about 12 times now. Some people just have a hard time understanding the word now.
Couldn't agree more, Eitan. Do we have any news in Congress today?
Yes, we do. Former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, ran out of Congress having a Vietnam flashback when she heard that John Boehner was elected to Speaker of the House again.
She was found 3 hours later hugging a tree on the White House lawn. The top story of tonight, however, is something that really caught the eye of many Americans.
Yes, it has, Michael. Congress has approved a $1 trillion grant to all free clinics nationwide to financially assist in abortions.
Many people question how the government can do this because it's such an overstep in federal power.
Well, in order for the people to understand this issue, they need to understand federalism as a whole.
Well, this brings us to our next segment. Our topic will be federalism's development throughout history.
We will be discussing the different types of federalism, court cases that came of it, and how they affected a society, and its presence in the Constitution.
Federalism wasn't really born until McCulloch versus Maryland. The Supreme Court case found that according to the Necessary and Proper Clause, Congress had implied powers that extended past their express powers.
This, however, isn't the basis of federalism in America. It is outlined in the Constitution, which says that the federal government has certain express powers in protecting its citizens, and other powers are reserved for the states.
With these powers in mind, the McCulloch versus Maryland decision triggered the first of four main eras of federalism, called martial federalism, which lasted from 1801 to 1835.
Citing the Necessary and Proper Clause, the Supremacy Clause, and the Commerce Clause to rule on this case, as well as Gibbons versus Ogden, martial federalism led to a growth of federal power through the broadening of the powers of various clauses that were previously mentioned.
The next era of federalism didn't start until 1850, and it lasted until 1932. This era was called dual federalism.
Is that when everything in Congress was decided with the dual?
That would be awesome. No wonder Pelosi had a Vietnam flashback. But in all seriousness, dual federalism was where there were separated roles for both the national and state governments.
Based on the rulings of Dred Scott versus Stanford and Plessy versus Ferguson, the 10th Amendment and reserved powers limited the federal government's ability to intrude on states' rights.
Since both cases involved civil rights, this era limited the power of the 14th Amendment, claiming that segregation was okay on the platform that blacks and whites were separate but equal.
The next era started in 1933 and ended in 1968. It was called cooperative federalism, and it was a result of the Great Depression, and it increased the role of the federal government in states' affairs, especially when it came to economic policy making.
This era started when FDR enacted the New Deal, which put many government programs into effect, resulting in all of society running through the federal government.
This type of federalism continued on through the JFK era with the New Frontier, and the Lyndon Johnson era with the Great Society.
In both programs, much like the New Deal, the government drastically increased its involvement in government-funded aid programs.
When I say social, you say ist. Social.
Ist.
Social.
Ist.
Many people had issues with the intrusion of the federal government. In both Wickard versus Filburn and Miranda versus Arizona, this issue was challenged by citizens, but the government was upheld to have not intruded on the citizens' rights.
This brings us to the most recent era of federalism that lasted from 1968 to 2001. It was called New Federalism.
Based on the rulings of U.S. versus Lopez and Prince versus U.S., the government's power in regards to social spending was severely limited.
This era gave birth to the rise in Republican power, known as the Republican Revolution of 1994, where Republicans gained control of both the House and the Senate. Reagan's devolution revolution gave back power to the states and limited the power of the federal government.
This new government system required that spending be delegated primarily through grants and mandates.
Eitan, this is... Oh.
Yeah.
Eitan, this is a news station. I don't want to hear about granting of dates for men.
Haha, no. Grants and mandates are forms of federal funding that act as incentives for states to follow the federal policies without actually intruding on the rights of states.
So it makes a little more sense that this abortion funding grant was implemented. But why do we really need federalism?
Well, it's simple. America's a really big country, but
What applies in one state?
what applies in one state doesn't necessarily apply in the other. It makes sense that you have different levels of delegating laws because different states and different places need different laws in fact.
Well, it's... oh, so it makes sense that the federal government makes rulings on some things, but states decide the rest.
Exactly, Michael. That's why we need federalism, to distinguish between federal and state issues and how they are dealt with.
Well, there you have it, folks. Hope you enjoyed that piece on federalism. Now it's time for sports.
Well, the hockey lockout just ended, so we can expect the start of the season in the next 2 weeks.
Eitan, this isn't Canada. No one cares about hockey here.
Well, I'm Eitan,
And I'm Michael.
from everyone here at AP Channel News.
Thank you for watching, and have a good night.